This is the Other 22 Hours podcast. Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of the Other 22 Hours podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Shafer-Haiss.
And I'm your other host, Michaela Anne. And since this show is still pretty new, thank you so much for checking us out. If it's your first time, welcome. If you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back.
Yeah, if you are a returning listener, we have a very simple, quick ask for you. We really enjoy making this podcast, and the way that we can keep going is by getting more listeners. The more listeners we have, the more guests we can get, and the more guests we have, the more ideas we can share with you. So if you have a favorite episode, if you could just take a second and pass that on to somebody that's never heard our show before, that goes a really long way in us being able to sustain this show, and we really appreciate that.
And we're not your typical promo show. We're not music journalists. We're not promoting records or latest tours. We want to have honest, real conversations with other artists about basically what we don't post on social media. We want to talk about the off-cycle times, the behind the scenes, tools and routines that they've found helpful in staying inspired, creative, and sane while building a career around their art.
And as we all know, there's so much in this business that is outside of our control. And so we like to focus on what is within our control, being our mindsets, what we create. So with that in mind, we approach our guests with the general question, what do you do to create sustainability in your life so that you can sustain your creativity?
And today's guest is Laura Veirs. And right out of the gate, you can hear how excited I am. Laura Veirs has been a personal inspiration for me for a long time. I've always just thought the little bit that I've known about her life and the way that she lives it is something I've kind of held up as a model. And this conversation proved me right.
I would say you'll hear us in there. I definitely just call it out that we are talking to a 50-year-old Michaela in this episode.
Laura is incredible, so I take that as a huge compliment. Laura has put out, I think, 14 plus records. She owns her own record label. She's been in a band with Katie Lang and Nico Case. She's written and published a children's book. She hosted a podcast herself, interviewing other working artist mothers. She's just incredible.
Yeah, you'll hear her briefly talk about the record that she just put out, and it was, I think she said 10 or 13 songs that she picked from 900 voice memos. That is a prolific amount of voice memos, she said, just from the last 8 years. So that gives you an idea of just how prolific of a creator Laura is. And she's also just so open and great with all of this on sustaining mental health and what she does. She is a big advocate for working at your own speed. She uses the analogy of, being a tortoise surrounded by a bunch of hares.
As prolific as she is, there's a big emphasis on rest and letting creativity lie fallow when it does and really going at your own pace.
Yeah, it's just a really great grounding conversation. A great balance of kind of thought and mindset, and then also really actionable examples. She's like, this is what I do and this is what works for me. And if you've listened to this show, Michaela is the heady esoteric questions and I'm the very tangible tools and actions questions. And I think we're both satisfied on this one. It scratched both itches. So
definitely.
Without further ado, here's our conversation with Laura Veirs.
I'm personally so excited you're here because I didn't know if I was finding the right place. I think I found an email on Bandcamp and was writing to your label. So I was so excited when your manager wrote me back. So thank you.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. I was curious I haven't listened to your podcast, but I think it's a very noble thing to be talking about.
Thank you. Yeah. The pandemic hit and it felt like so many people obviously were struggling, but also there was this hushed, oh wow, it's actually really nice to not be on the go all the time and touring relentlessly. And people were discovering that home life can be really nice. And then everything went back and it felt like everybody jumped right back in. And all of a sudden we were having conversations around the dinner table of yeah, things seem like they're going really well, but I'm really stressed. My body doesn't adjust to this anymore, or the finances are really challenging.
Yeah.
It just felt like we're increasingly living in this massive disconnect between the image we all put forth on social media and the reality of what being working musicians is in today's world. And also the challenge of some people being well, we want to keep up that farce. And then some of us being wait, but everybody feels really isolated and alone. Let's talk about it.
Good for you. Do you do them on a regular basis or on and off?
A little bit of an overachiever this year. We came out the gates with 5 episodes, and then we've been releasing one every week since then.
That's a lot.
Yeah, we're coming down to the end. A brief pause and a reset. And
so you don't stress yourselves out too much with your podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Take our own medicine and have a good life-work balance a little bit.
Good. So. That's good. It can be challenging, especially when you're starting a new venture of any kind. Even the podcast, like I was amazed by how much work goes into it.
Yeah. The first 7 or 8 episodes or so, I was editing myself and I was like, this is too much. And we're in my studio, I'm a producer and all of that, so I spend a lot of time working with audio, and I'm like, oh, it should be fine. And there's something about human speech and conversation that is just way different than music. It's very apparent when it doesn't feel natural and sound natural, and it was just too much. So we hired an editor, but it's still just the 3 of us essentially. So it's a very small operation.
Yeah. We're spending money on this, but we really believe in it. And it feels like these conversations are really of value to people, and oddly like a radical thing to bring forth. And much like your podcast, so many people, especially when I got pregnant, were like, oh, you have to listen to Laura Veirs' podcast. So I'm
so glad. Yeah, it's still alive. And like I did 15 interviews. And then I burnt out. But I was really glad I did this because they're kind of an archive, like just a record of snapshot of 15 different women's lives. And they all came from different backgrounds. And some of them were professional touring musicians, and some of them were local musicians, and some were in the art music world, and some were folk. It's like a range of races, styles, ages. And I was glad that I did it. And there's infinite moms. And I was thinking of doing dads too separately to interview. But then I was just like, I got to do other stuff. But like I said, I'm glad I did the 15.
Yeah, and it's referenced a lot in circles that I've been in, because increasingly, especially women, being like, there's not a ton of very visible examples of working musician moms. We have lots of examples of dads, and then it's just assumed the kids are at home with the mom, so that's fine. But with musician moms, it's like a genuine question that I understand, but it still strikes me. Even this past weekend, I was playing some shows and someone was like, where's your baby?
There is such a thing as a dad.
It's, I've brought it up a few times. I'll tour with them. I'll do the driving. I'll do the load in. And then I go to the hotel at like 6:30 and put our daughter to bed, and I'll work then. And without fail, almost every day, there's somebody that's like, wow, that's really amazing that you're doing that. And it just makes me shake my head. If the roles were reversed, Michaela was traveling and just being a parent, people wouldn't say anything.
Of course. It's an old time story, but it's great that you guys are flipping.
Yeah. And as I'm sure it's a constant adjustment and like what works, especially as the kid grows up, and much easier to take her when she was a baby than now a toddler.
Yeah, for sure.
So to start, are you at home right now?
Yes.
You're off? Okay.
I'm at home in Portland, Oregon. I did a couple shows last week with Carl Blau, who's one of my old friends and long-term collaborators. We played in Portland and Seattle. And then we're playing in England next week. We leave on Monday. Just a couple short little runs.
Nice. How old are your kids?
They're 13 and 10, 2 boys.
Oh, awesome. Has that kind of shifted how long you choose to go on tour for?
Yeah, I am divorced, so I'm a single mom, and I'm the primary parent. My ex has them every other weekend, so that makes touring really difficult now that they're school-aged. So I'll do like a weekend gig in LA, and then a weekend in New York. And then, for example, next week I'm going to the UK for a week, and my ex and I share Thanksgiving. So he'll do Thanksgiving one year, and then I'll do it the next. So this is my year off of parenting during Thanksgiving, so I opted to book a tour. So I'll fit the tours in around times when I'm not parenting. And sometimes I'll bring the kids on like a short run, and they'll sell merch, and they're like still cute enough to sell merch. They're going to be like ugly teenagers. Not ugly, but you know what I mean? Like, they're still cute.
That 15-year-old kid slinging.
Exactly. We've got like a bubbly 10-year-old and like a semi-presentable 13-year-old. But so they like to do that here and there on local gigs, and they did come to London. Sometimes I'll combine a little vacation at the end of a tour, and last year I had a nanny over the pandemic, which was an incredible gift, and she's a dear friend. And it just was this timing thing where I got divorced, and then I had an extra room in the house, and my friend needed a place to stay, and she had been our nanny, and so she moved in, and then the pandemic hit. And so I was like one of the luckiest single parents in the world during the pandemic, because I had a live-in helper who was my dear friend. So anyway, she met me in London last year, and brought the kids over. And we had a really fun vacation after we did the 4 shows. So I integrate them into my life and they know what it's like being a touring musician, but I've really limited my touring time because I am very dedicated to them. And it's a lot of gymnastics and logistics for me if I go on tour anymore. So I kind of accepted that, but also I'm 50 and I've been doing this so long. You know, I've kind of stayed at the same level for many years. I did have a little bump with the Case-Lang Veirs thing, but it's not like I make bank and it's like stupid not to go tour. Well, you can go tour and make some money, but it's not like where my bread and butter is. My bread and butter is more publishing and writing and having a big catalog, just generating a lot of material a lot of the time. So I don't mind not touring anymore. I actually like to do just very short bursts. I was talking with Kate Stables from This Is the Kit the other day. She was in town and she loves to tour. And I think that is just her favorite. She told me, I was like, why do you tour so much? She's like, I love it. It's my favorite part of the job. And, you know, there are so many different hats we wear as musicians. We wear the writer's hat. We wear the performing in the studios, session musician hat. We do the performing on the stage hat. And then in my case, I also run my own label and there's a lot of business hats that I wear. Performing is not my favorite hat. I like it, but it's not like I love the stage. I don't mind not touring that much anymore.
Is that something that you knew all along, or
Yes.
is that something that you came to a realization to?
No, I was terrified of the stage from the very beginning.
Oh, interesting.
Awful, debilitating stage fright. Panic attacks, the whole thing, shaky hands. So
Yeah.
it's taken me years to get comfortable. And I mean, sometimes I'm quite comfortable now. And then I'm like, wow, I was so comfortable. And then I'm surprised that I was so comfortable. But it's not like I'm one of those lifers who's like always throwing up before the stage. You know, like there are some musicians who have like debilitating stage fright, lifelong. I'm luckily not in that camp, but I'm not like some of the people that I've worked with. I should ask them. But for example, Katie Lang and Nico Case, I was in a band with them called Case-Lang Veirs. We made a record.
I was going to ask with stage fright what that's like.
Oh, it was awful.
Katie Lang.
It was awful. So bad. I was like, I don't even know if I can do this tour. And it was booked. It was like huge shows. Like some of them were like 6,000 capacity. I mean, I play like to 200 or 300 people. And then not only that, but just the pressure of being one of the marquee names, the baby mouse or whatever, the baby bear of the group. Which chair are you going to sit in? This is the baby's chair. The girl, what's that called? The girl in the bear
Goldilocks?
Thank you. Oh my God. I don't know why that.
Bears.
Yes. They were 3 little bears, but one, I felt like such a little bear.
Yeah.
But songwriting wise, I felt like a big bear because I wasn't a big bear. Like I was generating, I either wrote or co-wrote all those songs because that was honestly the strength that I brought to that group. It's just idea generation and song generation, kind of like a mule. Just like plowing the fields of song, like here's some more, you know? And so that was cool. I did feel confident in that part. But then when the tour was booked, we had a crew of 12. I was like, oh my God, what if I can't do it? And then like, what if we have to cancel? That could be losing thousands and thousands of dollars for everyone. And I just like pre-freaked. But I was able to do it. And I did get more comfortable as the shows went on, and like the 6,000 capacity venue was half full. So there was only 3,000 people there. And it was interesting because the promoters and the managers were super bummed. You know,
You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It was interesting, like going to a whole different realm of the music industry because I had always been more in like in the band with the band and the baby and just like scrappy, you know? And suddenly it was like tour buses and your face is on a billboard and you're playing the Ryman and all that stuff. And it was like, there were aspects of it that I really liked. You know, I did like touring in a tour bus. It was fun. Someone was driving me around and I could sleep. But there were other aspects of it that I was surprised by. I felt a sense of isolation that was new. Like, I have my own room backstage in this cavernous venue. I don't feel very cozy. Where is everybody? And like, I'm not allowed to set up my stuff. So what am I going to do for the next 2 hours? Or like, we're not supposed to sell merch because the other principals didn't want to go or couldn't go to the merch table. So, and then like big dark theaters where you can't see anyone. It was very isolating. So
Interesting.
there were things about it that I actually didn't like. There were things that I liked. So I guess my point in bringing that up is that you think, oh, if I could only get to this level, everything would be great. It's like anything in life. It's like, yeah, it comes with good and it comes with some sucky stuff. I just didn't know what the good stuff would be or what the sucky stuff would be.
Yeah.
My point being, those two seemed very comfortable on stage. Very comfortable.
Yeah. Was there any kind of tools or things that you learned to do to become comfortable in those shows? Or was it like cliff jumping and you just counted to 3 every night and jumped in and got
Yeah, any
used to
like rituals beforehand to help yourself?
I would take half a beta blocker and a glass of wine. That would help me.
There you go. Yeah.
Just to keep the shakes off and then chill out for a second. But I wasn't
Yeah.
like pounding pills and like getting wasted. Just like
Yeah.
moderate. But I feel like those kinds of little medicinal helpers kept me like from freaking out. And so, Katie meditates. I don't know why she's meditating. Well, I know she has a long-term meditation practice, but I don't think she's wrestling with stage fright per se. But she does meditate before every show to center herself and maybe ground herself in why she's doing it.
Interesting. Yeah, and I feel like I've seen both of them perform in their own projects, and it feels like not opposites, but such like semi-different energy. As an audience member, when I've seen Nico Case, she seems like so casually confident and comfortable, and it's just like, this is me, and I like say what I want, and I'm wearing like a flannel shirt and jeans, and like I am a huge fan of both of them. And Katie Lang seems like very much putting on a show in a lot of ways. So that's such an interesting, like, to then be in the middle of those two energies.
Yeah.
Could be very balancing, I would think.
It was cool. They were definitely different people, really different people, and like really different writers too. Like it was challenging and fun to co-write with them because I hadn't done a lot of co-writing yet. I learned a lot about that process, and I'm curious to see whether we might do it again. Katie and I have been writing lately, but I'm not sure if we're going to make another record with the trio. I would love to do that, but there were also some things about it that were challenging. Like we did have some like ego battles. So I think that's typical with super groups or like people with big, names. We were wrestling with creative control a little bit.
Yeah.
So a lot of those groups don't make it off the ground because of that, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine when you're used to being able to hold the steering wheel yourself,
Yes.
and all of a sudden there's the driving instructor next to you also with the steering
Yes.
wheel, and it's
It's like, wait, no, I'm used to everything is about me. And
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
and that's not like narcissism, or I think every person who's built a career where it starts and ends with your name and it's your music and everything, it would be challenging to then be like, oh, okay, this is a different dynamic than the deep habitual thinking I've developed over time.
Yeah.
I love that you talked about how like it comes up a lot in these conversations of when you're younger, or even when maybe you hold on to it for a long time, but this idea of, oh, if I get to this level, it will be better. If I get these things, this size tour buses, whatever, and really starting to learn, oh, there's pros and cons to everything. There's actually a lot of benefits to driving in a car or van and having a hotel every night versus sleeping on a moving bus and waking up and having to figure out where you can go to the bathroom because you can't use the bus toilet. Those kind of things. And like, it's always refreshing to hear like these ideas of success. Actually, it's what you make it and what you find comfortable. And there's great value in being an artist that spends their whole life driving in vans and cars and playing to 100, 200, 300 people on any given night. That's a massive success as well.
For sure. And I think it's a great question. What is success? But for me, if I'm going to just like shoot from the hip, I would say, do you feel joy in your life? Do you have good relationships? And I mean, frankly, that is what brings joy to people. If you study the books on happiness, it's like the quality of your relationships is what determines your level of happiness. It's not like we played to the hugest crowd ever, or we got the Grammy, or we got the money, or we got the status, or, So those are things that I mark as success. And like, do you see beauty in life? Can you find inspiration? Is your heart open? Are you interested in sharing what's in your heart? Or can you take a break? That's what I'm going to do next year. I'm with a guy who is a professor, and professors, tenured ones at least, get a sabbatical every 7 years. So they get a paid year off to do whatever they want.
Oh my God,
Which I think is so smart. If
Yeah.
you're running a college, you want those professors to stay happy. And there's a recharge period for them. And I've been grinding for so long. I was like, I'm going to take a sabbatical with you. And he's like, you should. So then I was like, what does that even mean? Because I can design my days as I wish now, but I'm always creating new work for myself. I'm creating like deadlines, and I'm pushing for this show, and I'm like that person, or, like trying to keep the team together, or where's this merch going, or like printing shirts, or now I have an art practice, and like I'm so busy, plus single mom, like laundry, like keep the house going, and I like to cook and like keep everything.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, okay, what does the sabbatical look like? I'm going to go get my sheet because I printed it out. Okay, so I printed this out and I put it on by my desk on the wall. It says, my sabbatical year, starting June 1st, 2024, going to June 1st, 2025. What does this mean? Number 1, only doing high-paying shows that come to me, not chasing shows or tours. It's okay to build a vacation around a show. Number 2, painting for fun. Number 3, making music for fun, if I feel like it, with no pressure whatsoever. Number 4, putting out painting collections when I feel like it. Okay, 5, reading, resting, listening to music, biking, spending time with the kids, and enjoying life while being careful about spending. Letting the money come in and building up savings rather than spending on producing. I'll check back with you on June 1st, 2025 and let you know if I actually did my sabbatical.
Oh my God. I'm going to make a note to reach back out and see if you'd be willing to come back on.
I'll be like all zen now. Like, no problems in the world, everybody. Just peace out.
So what's your ratio of joy to nerves right now, reading that list?
I feel like so excited about my sabbatical year. I think it's so great because I do have pretty good passive income. It's not like I'm super stressed all the time. I'm not wealthy and I can't relax, but I think for a year I could. So I feel a lot of excitement about the idea. And I think I'm like, why can't I just have this mindset all the time? Why can't I get out of the grind mindset? And so maybe if I do that sabbatical year, I will be able to chill out a little bit in terms of like I produced a new record and now I'm putting a live album out 6 months later and flying people all around the world from London and New York. And I'm doing that stuff because I love to do it, but it adds a lot of stress. So I'm trying to figure out how I can just stop producing stuff all the time and just producing paintings and stuff, but keeping it private, or just not putting any pressure on myself to excel or produce or put your work out there and stay visible. And I made some changes in my social media life that I would recommend to people because I was obsessively checking Instagram probably 20 times a minute or maybe 20 times every 5 seconds for all day.
Yes.
Yeah. The thing where you close the app and then open it again immediately and you're like, I was just looking at this.
Yeah.
So I have this hiking group, these 2 women. They're also artist moms. We're going to be doing our 10th annual hike this year. And we have to book it out 9 months in advance because we're so busy with all our other obligations. But every time we go on this hiking trip, we talk about Instagram. And one of them has a ton of followers and one of them's growing her thing. But we just wrestle with it because it seems important because it's a way of communicating, but also it's soul sucking and energy sucking in a way. So I came to the conclusion a year ago that I just needed to get off of it. And in fact, I needed to give the password to someone else who can't tell me what it is. So I did that. And she's been doing my social media for a year. I plan the posts. I give her the photos and the text and she posts them. And then she goes back and likes and says thank you. It looks like me, and anybody who's listening to this who's disappointed, sorry, but that's how I can maintain my sanity and also not lose contact with my fans. Because I do stuff. I put out records, I have paintings, I want to sell stuff. That's how I live. So I want to communicate, but also I don't want to be, basically what sealed the deal for me in terms of Instagram was, I read this quote. It's weird how little epiphanies can shift your life. But the quote was simply your life is what you pay attention to.
Yeah.
It's you are what you eat. It's so simple, but you are what you put into your body. Why don't we fuel our bodies with healthy food? Okay, what am I ingesting? What am I doing with my days? I'm looking at this screen. Is that what I want my life to be? Paying attention to Instagram? No, I want to be paying attention to books. I want to be paying attention to people who are close to me, my partner, my kids, my friends, my family, my community, and my wider fan base. Yes, I want to give them things that they like music and art. I want to be paying attention to my health. I want to be paying attention to the environment and to my muse, which is the mystery of where does creativity come from? What is driving this anyway? Why am I even doing any of this? Those are the questions I want to be asking. Not how many people like this, or how do I get back to that person, or who's DMing me, or and no shade on people who are really into Instagram. I totally get it. I was totally addicted. But for me, I'm just saying, I know that the premise of your podcast is how do you maintain health? Mental health is a huge part of that, and stamina and perseverance through this, which can be a very difficult business. I exercise every day. I eat well. I'm not perfect, but I do take care of myself and take care of my kids. I have a dog. I have a very boring home life.
Sounds nice.
I do care about the long term and mental health and physical health being part of that. And I see myself as the turtle. And there's the hares running by me. But then like I'm just walking along like this little turtle. And I keep finding ways to be inspired and to feel energized by making art or music and like exploring the world that way. And that makes me feel really good. So I feel like I've gone through patches where I definitely not created and not wanted to create, but I think that's also totally great. Like I wrote July Flame, which is my best album, I think, one of my best albums, like certainly the one that most people like. And I end up playing a lot of the songs live. That album came out in 2010. And I had been writing like feverishly up to that, like in all of 2009, a ton of songs I didn't like at all. And I asked a friend of mine, he's actually the guy that I wrote the song called Best Kept Secret in Silver Lake about. He's this musician, Tim Young, who lives in LA. He's like a good friend, and we've been collaborators for a long time. And I called him, I was like, I hate all these songs. He's like, just stop writing songs for like all summer. So I didn't write any all summer, the summer of 2009. And then I was ready to write again. I needed to fill my cup back up.
Yeah.
I was like out hiking, wandering around Portland. Like I was making peaches. I went to the farmer's market and saw this peach called July Flame. Let's make these peaches. Oh, that's a cool name. And then the ideas started to come for that record. And then I wrote the record quickly and it was beautiful. My point being, I think for long-term tortoise living, taking rests and breaks are really important and not beating yourself up about it and enjoying that time, being less productive and like stepping out of the hamster wheel that we all seem to like easily get wrapped up in, whether that's like the cycle of touring, recording, playing, writing, all that stuff. Like you can step out of that. We can all step out of it and then step back in when we feel like it's the right time. We don't have to stay like grinding, because if you grind too hard, you're at risk of either burning out or like getting addicted to something.
Right.
Maybe Instagram, maybe drugs. I don't know. Or just like, we all know plenty of people who have fallen away from it or become disengaged or became alcoholic and fell off the rails, or it's a hard life.
Yeah, or even addicted to the gratification, the attention of being told you're good and your show's growing and,
Yeah. And like that feeling of getting wrapped up in this like capitalist idea that everything should always be growing. I disagree.
Right. I think similarly. I see a lot of people get addicted to the struggle in a way. There's the feeling of the grind and the feeling of like, no, I'm pushing through this. I'm doing work. I'm being productive. Like that's what this is supposed to feel like. That when things are easy, and I'm admittedly talking from my own experience, when something is easy and I am gentle with myself, I don't feel like I'm actually making any progress. When in actuality, I think if I'm able to zoom out, I am making progress because I'm recharging. I'm staying inspired. I'm staying fresh. But it doesn't have that like tangible grit or grind to the action.
I can relate to that.
Yes, the dopamine hits. Yeah, of being like, oh, this is hard. And then the breakthrough makes me feel like I did something, or it's all like the ups and downs that can be addictive as well. I'm someone who gets pulled. It takes a lot of work for me to stay centered in what I want to do. And Aaron's a really good mirror for me. He'll say, okay, like I need papers, like your intention list for your sabbatical year. Like I need that stuff like every day of like, wait, why am I doing what I do? This is my plan for this day or this week or this year. And then I'll get sidetracked and be like, wait, everything's wrong. And Aaron will always be like, you made a plan and everything's going according to plan, but you're getting distracted. And I feel that in life of like, these are my values. This is what I think is how I want to live my life as an artist. And then I'll be like, oh, but that looks really exciting. Maybe I should do that because I want that instead. I'm like, wait, nope, I need to stay right here. And it's really another reason why I love this podcast and these conversations, because it's such a reminder, especially for people who've been in it for a long time, who've gone through enough cycles to be like, yeah, we've learned those lessons of like, how do you come back? Because all of the buzz and the highs and all that stuff, it always comes back down. How do you stay in the tortoise lane of, this is how you build. Not everybody's going to be clapping for you every day and telling you how you're the greatest of the year or whatever. Do you ever have times that you get pulled into the hare lane and that you're like, wait, nope, I like my tortoise lane? How do you stay in there if you get pulled, or is that just your natural tendency?
I mean, staying off social media helps a lot. And I have the privilege of having someone run it for me. Not everyone can do that. I don't read my reviews. I haven't read them in years. It was fun getting reviews in the beginning, and then I realized even the good reviews were like getting in my head in a weird way. I'm glad I get reviews. I don't want to sound like I don't care, because I do care. I like being seen. I like being acknowledged. But I try to stay in touch with, like, there's this quote by Agnes Martin, who's a painter I really like. The measure of your life is the amount of beautiness and happiness of which you're aware. So I try to remind myself, are you aware of happiness? Are you aware of beauty? Because it's around you every day, especially with kids. Like, they bring happiness. They bring stress too, of course, and like messes and everything, but they are reminders for me to check in with the moment, be mindful, and like staying grounded in, like I said, those core values of like, are my relationships good? Do I have joy in my life? Am I noticing things like it's fall and trees are changing? Or am I so in my head that I'm like spaced out on a walk just thinking about the next thing I need to do, or like stressing about some logistical thing? It's practice for me to remind myself, like, not to say we're all just specks of dust and nothing means anything, but it is good to remind yourself that it's a privilege to be an artist. It's wonderful to have this opportunity, and to be able to make a living of some kind as an artist is unusual and great. And it's challenging, and it comes with like a lot of freedom, which is great, but a lot of need for us to check in with taking care of ourselves, slowing down, whether that's a meditation practice. For me, exercise takes a lot of stress off, and reminding ourselves that the things that, let's say, capitalism thinks are important aren't necessarily the things that we have to guide our lives around. Like I was saying, always growing. That doesn't need to be the way that you live. You could be like always curious. That could be a different always, like always awake. There's always something, like some mundane thing that could be beautiful right around the corner. That's what I'm interested in with art and with music. It's like, how do I transform this world into something magical? That's like the role of the artist. That is awesome. And it's challenging, and it's deep, and it's hard, and it's beautiful. It's all the things. And that's why I think I do go through phases where I'm like, this is stupid. Like, why am I even doing this? But then like inevitably I'll get more in touch with like why I think being an artist is amazing and wonderful. Like when I hang out with certain musicians, I'm like, these people are like some of the most interesting people I'll ever meet. The way that they see the world, the way that they approach life. So outside of the normal way. Beautiful.
Yeah, and I think like my younger self thought the only excitement was out there. You had to be chasing the excitement. Touring was addictive to me because you never knew what was going to happen, and seeing places. And now having a pandemic really shifted that for me, and having a child. But that idea that the ordinary is extraordinary, of just there's so much beauty and awe in just routine and daily life and home life that I never saw before, that I think is also a powerful role of an artist to highlight that. Not just the kind of stereotypical exciting things that we romanticize, but just elevating the beauty that's in, a peach.
Yeah, I agree.
I was curious, there's pros and cons always of having an outside label run things for you, but then, not having as much ownership over your work, and the pros and cons of then having your own label and the responsibility, the cost, but then the increased ownership, especially as you became a parent and had that extra workload of raising children, and how that affected your relationship to your actual making of music.
Yeah, that's a good question. I started my label basically out of the gate because I was coming from like a Riot Girl, Ani DeFranco, like sell it out of the back of your car. And so after a couple of those, I got picked up by Bella Union in Europe, and then Nonesuch for a couple albums, like 3 albums. So I was like on a major label for a few years, maybe 5 years. Then I got dropped from Nonesuch, and then I got back on Bella. But then I ultimately decided to just run my own thing internationally. My most recent release is called Phone Orphans. That one is the first one that I've done a full international release. And it was a lot of work. It was like international teams of people like getting vinyl shipped up everywhere. And like I realized too late, I really should have pressed up CDs. I'm like, God, I really should have invested that extra $5,000. I didn't even know anyone buys CDs. It's just like, I probably should have a manager, like a label manager, but there's less and less money in the music industry, let's face it.
Yeah.
And so I don't have like excess huge sums of money to just hire on a pro to run my label. I have a manager who helps me, and I have like a team of people, but it's a lot of logistics. And part of me is like, maybe I have too many logistics, but one of my goals is to like chill on the logistics and have more of a team in place to like reduce my logistical need during the sabbatical year, like my need to be involved with logistics. But I do ultimately like being a DIY person. And I don't know if any label would have wanted to put out this Phone Orphans album. As my own producer, I can decide that stuff. And I really liked that feeling of like, all right, this is an alternative outsider folk release. Like I had all these demos on my phone. Some of them went back 8 years and I went through 900 voice memos and found 14 that I liked. And I was like, I'm putting this out. I don't care. Part of me was like, this is dumb. No one's going to like this. But then deeper under that, this is dumb was, this is actually cool because I didn't think anyone would hear these. This is me writing the song and performing it fresh out of the gate to my phone. No listeners.
Yeah.
And with no expectation of listeners beyond possibly a producer listening for an album, you know, like curating the songs for an album. I wasn't thinking anyone would ever hear them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes the recording special because it's very relaxed, way more relaxed than I've ever been able to be in a studio.
Yeah.
I like sharing that intimacy with my fans. But all this to say, I'm not sure if a label would, they'd be like, that's just your phone demos. Like, we're not putting that out. But It's gotten great reviews. Like, I hired press. I had to invest a lot of money in it. Like, they're not high budget stuff, but it adds up. Vinyl.
Oh, yeah.
And like press people, photos, videos, all that stuff. And the press people have told me it's getting great reviews because I told them I don't read my reviews. But
Yeah.
I know that and I'm glad because I thought, oh, maybe no one's going to listen to this at all. Or it'll be ignored or they'll be like, she's just given up. She's just like recording stuff on her phone, you know? So anyway, I was glad that it's gotten this burst of excitement around it that makes me feel like, all right, like I know what I'm doing here enough to like run this thing and get this stuff over to New Zealand and wherever it needs to go. And so that kind of makes me feel a sense of self-efficacy and like agency. That's pretty gratifying. And I haven't seen the full return on my investment yet, but over time, like I never signed a publishing deal. I have a 10% BMG admin deal that I've had since the beginning. And I had friends signing like $60,000 advances. I'm like, ooh, that's a lot of money. And then later I'm like, I'm glad I didn't sign that because you give away so much of your percentage when you do that. So I always have kept the like DIY, like I got this kind of semi-paranoid ethos in the sense of like, I have a friend who lost millions of dollars because their business manager took it all because they weren't paying attention. You know, like, it's like, I want to pay attention enough. I don't want to be in the weeds of everything. It's like death by numbers. But I do want to pay enough attention that I'm like understanding the basic machinations of my business and like where stuff is and who's doing what and like where the money is and what the income is. And, you know, I'm not like obsessed with budgets or anything. I wish I was more obsessed with budgets. Frankly, I'd make probably better decisions. But in general, I think like I'm probably a rare artist in the sense of like, I don't get off on spreadsheets, but I make a lot of spreadsheets.
Yeah, I love spreadsheets now. I hated them. I hated them years ago, and now I love them. It makes me feel better. If I start to get anxious, I check out my spreadsheets. I've got tour budget spreadsheets. I've got year income spreadsheets, like everything. And every new spreadsheet that I make, I'm like, oh my God, this is making me feel so much better. And then I can write a song because I'm like someone who has to know, I have to feel like everything's okay. It's challenging for me because I'm an artist, but I also am like, but I want to make money. I want my house to be nice. I want to feel comfortable. I want to have a retirement fund. I want all these things that the stereotype would tell you, oh, artists don't worry about that stuff. And I'm like, no, I've never felt like I would just be taken care of. I have to make sure that stuff's okay. Spreadsheets make me feel secure.
Yeah, there's a reason we're talking today, sister.
When you walked away to get your paper, Aaron said, I feel like I'm looking at 50-year-old you.
Straight. She got so excited when you're like, oh, I wrote it down. I got to go get something. Michaela was literally just like, yes. Amazing.
No, that's great. I feel like we're kindred spirits for sure because I'm like that too. My house is super tidy.
I'm not super tidy.
Okay. Well, mine is. And I like spreadsheets, and I feel less stressed when I make a spreadsheet. And then once my house is nice, I make a big mess. Like papers are everywhere, and like paintings of like music and shit's flying around, you know, like. And then it's all cleaned at the end of the day, and then I start over, right? And it's always making a mess, and then like cleaning it up, making a mess, cleaning it up.
That does feel similar to me. It's like chaos.
Yeah, like, and I have not enormous, but I have a good retirement plan, and like I've been building that up for 20 years. Like I care about stability. I care about health. I care about like my kids and providing a nice home for them. And I do enjoy and have and want financial stability. And I think that's legit for artists to get that and want that. And especially artists who are women, like asking for higher fees and knowing what you're worth and owning that. Those are things that are hard, especially for women. But we can do it and we're doing it. I love seeing, like, as I get older, so many more women and non-binary people and trans and queer people doing like more of the things that used to be the realms of only the white men, like the production, engineering, mastering, all of that stuff. I'm seeing younger, more diverse people going into those roles, and I love seeing that. So I know it's changing. I know it's getting better, but sometimes it feels super slow. But I do see it happening from the ground up. And I'm not like super in the mix, but I'm in the mix enough to see that, like, back when I was growing up, there would be hardly any women in the recording studio ever.
I was just talking to a friend yesterday who's a musician mom and a producer, and she went to this like engineering conference over the weekend with another female producer and engineer. And she was talking about how there's this feeling I want to tell other, women, anyone who doesn't identify as a white man, like, you don't know less. There's not some secret information that you don't have. Like, you know just as much as these white guys who are dominating this space. They've just felt comfortable in this space. So it feels like a responsibility to be like, we can create the spaces to make others feel comfortable. You're not inferior. If you have a question, they probably also have that question, but they've just been conditioned to know that it's okay to find out and to make mistakes and learn. And I think there's been this kind of sentiment of, for those of us who look at these spaces and think, for me, I don't see women musicians with their babies out there on the road. So how am I going to ever do this? And people think that's not possible. The more the other takes up space, the more it invites more others to come.
I agree. Yes.
I know we are conscious of your time. So if there's any last thing you want on this topic that you feel like imparting with us and our listeners of just how to stay connected to it all.
I go in and out of feeling connected myself to the muse or to feeling inspired. But I'd say, like, if you're feeling a fallow period, that's okay. Just see it through, and inevitably a spark is going to come. And you can follow the next spark. And that's like the reality of the life that we've chosen as artists, is you don't really know what the next spark is going to be. You just have to wait for it sometimes, and that's fine. Try to be patient.
Yeah. Mary Gaucher was a guest on this podcast, and she said, patience with your art and persistence with your business.
I like that.
And it's so good.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Needs to be a bumper sticker for us.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron and Michaela. That was really fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Other 22 Hours podcast. You can find more info on this episode, including links to things that we talked about, by going to theother22hours.com and clicking on episodes.
Reviews go a long way in getting our show in front of more listeners. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to go leave a quick review wherever you listen to podcasts. And we'll see you back here next week for another episode.